Chris. Welcome to the Tech on Demand podcast. It's always great to talk to you about perennials. Our topic today is forcing perennials out of winter dormancy and into bloom for spring and summer sales. It's not really a new concept for most growers, but I think that the growth in the perennial market has caused a lot of folks to add perennials to their mix. There's been a lot of research done to update protocols for breaking dormancy, and I thought maybe it would be a good time to have a quick discussion to make sure everyone's on the same page when it comes to forcing perennials this spring. So welcome to Tech on Demand.
Great to see you, Bill. Yeah, I think this is going to be a very popular topic. Right now is the time of year when perennials are going to be waking up, so it's a good opportunity for some tips.
Sounds good. And we have gotten a lot of questions from growers lately. I've gotten some questions from newsletter readers. We've heard from even some of our sales reps who have customers that have some questions related to breaking dormancy and forcing. So I think you have some new tactics to share as well. But this has been done obviously for as long as we've been producing perennial plants. So why don't you start with the kind of how it's always been done and some reasons that growers have moved to maybe new school ways of forcing perennials, but what's the old school method?
Yeah, old school. Let's call it traditional. I don't want to date myself here. So
sounds good.
The traditional method, really traditional is fall planting all your perennials into finished containers, putting them in a hoop house, minimally heated, cover them with a blanket oftentimes. And we did a great overwintering webinar a few years ago on have the best success with that traditional method. And then when springtime comes, we have all our perennials in one house. The days are getting longer. Our house is getting warmer. These perennials are all just kind of wake up on their own as we keep them maybe from freezing. Mm-hmm. And then newer, there are suppliers these days that are offering vernalized liners as well. Right. And so this can be a much easier way to start with to get the benefits of an overwintered perennial, but not have to contend with the overwintering yourself and the potential losses there. And so many growers will take that completely dormant liner, pot it up, and then throw it in that same house, throw it in that minimally heated greenhouse, and perennials are going to wake up and flower when they want to. So that's what I would consider traditional method for growing from a vernalized container or liner.
Okay, and then if we talk about kind of new school with the warmer house, what temperatures are we looking for, and what are the current best practices? What do they look like?
Okay, so new school is this idea of actually forcing. We always kind of talk about forcing perennials. Okay, it's getting them to grow earlier in season, but what we want to do is we want to really force them. And so think about it, throwing a cold treated and vernalized dormant liner into a larger pot. We're going to put it in a no heat greenhouse. Say we're going to water it in well, and then we're just going to sit and say, we're still early in the springtime. We have cloudy, we have rainy weather, we have really cool nights. Cold and wet, as you can imagine, with any plants is a bad combination. And so we put this together with perennials, with annuals, with anything. You are more likely to have losses. You're also going to be having a much less uniform crop. They're going to come out of dormancy at a large variability. And so you're going to have all different sizes of containers out there. So the idea then is basically, cooking them. We want to warm them up very quickly. I'm talking like 70, 72 degrees soil temperature. Okay. And if we bring that temperature up very quickly, that's going to leave no doubt in these perennials' minds that it is time to wake up. It is time to go. I am being forced to wake up. Another thing to think about when you're doing that, as I mentioned, soil temperature. Now, if we are going into a Quonset greenhouse, we need to be very aware of that soil temperature, because if that greenhouse was cold before, say we just now covered it up and we're heating it up, if that pot's going directly on the ground, that ground is still frozen. Right. And that's going to have a tendency to suck all the heat out of that pot. So anything we can do just to get a little bit of airspace underneath those pots, use plug trays, crates, whatever you can do to get it up off the ground just a little bit is really going to help you maintain that soil temperature and, again, help force these perennials more uniformly and with fewer losses with very warm temperatures. Now, once they do start growing, then we can cool our temperatures off as we would traditionally think about perennials being grown at cooler temperatures. But initially, it's going to take 7 up to 14 days, I would say, with some varieties to get them active again, get some fresh leaves on there, and get those roots starting to grow out into the containers.
And then how would you know as a grower when that's happening? 7 to 14 days. What would they look like? Do you pull them out of the pot, look at the roots, or how do you determine if they're coming back to life?
I think that's going to be the main thing. Some things are going to be putting on the top growth first, and so we can look for those new leaves coming out. Some perennials are more evergreen already, and so you're not going to be able to see it as much on top. And that's where you just pop that plug out of the pot and see if we're getting active roots on there. And that's going to be your best indication on when you can gradually start dropping those temperatures. But we want to make sure that's fairly uniform throughout the crop before we do drop those temperatures.
Okay, makes sense. Why don't we get a little bit tactical here? Because sometimes you hear growers say, I'm really not set up to force perennials, whether that's their structures or their lighting or anything like that. Especially when you start talking about this new school approach with the temperature requirements, and then I know that night interruption is also a tactic that's used. Talk a little bit about that, and is it really as hard as it sounds?
All right. Well, yeah, we do get pushback on this new school on forcing them with the very warm temperatures because I totally understand people don't want to put the heat into it. That's just going to cost you more. I can have pretty good success with natural temperatures without running heat. And I can deal with some ununiformity, and that's perfectly okay. But it does come to the fuel cost and how much you really want to put into there. If you're starting with vernalized liners, we're buying in liners. They're completely dormant about this time of year. One tactic that's beneficial, especially if you look at some of these like an echinacea, and echinacea is really what got this conversation started here, because oftentimes growers will have losses with echinacea in the springtime. They just won't break dormancy. And so one thing we can do then, if we don't want to warm up an entire greenhouse, how about if we leave those plants in the liner tray and put just that tray in your warmest greenhouse? And so we don't have to take up all the square footage, all that heat. Everybody's going to have one place where they're keeping begonias or anything like that in the springtime that they can place liner trays and take up much less square footage and take advantage of the heat there. And then wait until you see that active growth. And there it's going to be more looking for your top growth, getting them to break dormancy on the top. That way, then we know they're alive, for one, because sometimes you can look at that tray, you're not really sure, is this really alive? Yeah. That way we get the more uniform breaking of dormancy. It's a lot easier to warm up a small cell than it is a larger pot. True. And so we can have great success with that way. Then we transplant and we can go into a cooler house, but we still want to have a warm temperature in the soil to try to get those roots growing out. And then you mentioned the night interruption lighting. That is another factor where people say over and over, I'm not set up for that. If you have a plug-in where you can plug an extension cord in, you are set up for that, because all night interruption lighting requires is a light bulb. Does not take a grow light, does not take a ton of electricity. A light bulb and a standard hardware store timer, you turn that light bulb on from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., that's going to help break dormancy on a certain class of perennials that includes echinacea. Okay. And these are our long day perennials, echinacea, tall phlox, hibiscus, items like that normally don't start growing in the garden until later because they require the heat, and they're actually waiting for the days to get longer also. And so if we are doing this, whether in a whole greenhouse with a string of lights, over the entire crop, or in just the liner tray, I've had this question, it's like, why am I putting a light on a plant that looks dead? Yeah. There's not even any growth there. What is it doing? And I'm not sure it's well understood exactly how it happens, but what it is the light, mostly the far red light, from what I understand, from the light bulbs, actually penetrates the crown.
Okay.
Far red light will go right through the leaves of the
Yeah.
plants. Far red light's what causes stretch when you have tight canopies of plants. But what it does, it penetrates the soil, penetrates the ground, and you start getting those chemical reactions starting in the crowns and telling them it's time to wake up. Now, we do have a comprehensive list of perennials that greatly benefit from long day lighting and warm temperatures to break dormancy, and highly recommend it, especially over that traditional method of planting them up in a cold greenhouse, and they're going to grow when they want to. So here we're going to get much better uniformity out of our crop. We're going to have much fewer losses. Just be aware of those crops that do require long day lighting along with warm temperatures. But the warm temperatures themselves are going to help you out tremendously.
Excellent. Excellent. And I will put links to the list. I will put links to the overwintering webinar that you did into the show notes. This has been great information. Before we close, do you have any other tips to share with growers who are forcing perennials? Any tricks for disease prevention, anything like that?
Well, when you do buy in a dormant liner, they do look dead. And so there's always that question. And the thing is, these are going to be coming from a supplier from a cold house, normally
Okay.
going to be kept at 32, 35 degrees. The interesting thing is at those temperatures, botrytis can come in there and you won't even see it. Botrytis is stealth
Hmm.
in the cold temperatures because it's not this big gray sporulating mass. It's a really inconspicuous white fungus at those temperatures. And what it can do is it can work its way into the crowns and you won't even realize it at a time. You might receive these in the mail and not even realize that there could be botrytis on them because there's a lot of dead leaves usually on the top
Sure.
of a dormant liner as well. So in general, I feel like it's really good practice to do a good heavy crown rot prevention spray. I don't like recommending products, but
Yeah.
my favorite was Daconel.
Okay.
Always like a good heavy spray of Daconel. It takes care of botrytis, takes care of rhizoctonia, all kinds of fungi. It also has that weather stick that helps it stick and not wash off with the first watering. I think that's really good for preventing crown rots. If you're going to be transplanting these into a greenhouse and you traditionally have some root rot issues, maybe a good idea to do a preventive drench before transplanting if there's crops you traditionally have losses in. In general, I don't like using a lot of fungicide drenches. I only use them when I absolutely have to
Hmm.
because drenches can be very stressful on plants.
Right.
And again, it can lead to delayed rooting out or uniformity in the crop. So whenever possible, stick with the spray, but always be aware that, coming in with all the dead material on top and coming from a cold greenhouse, it's good practice to put a good heavy spray on there, especially if we're going to be transplanting them into a nice warm greenhouse where whatever might be dormant in there can start growing right along with
Yep.
your plants.
Exactly. The botrytis will wake up at the same time as your perennials are waking up.
Exactly. So a good spray to prevent that and help your plants along is going to be good practice.
Awesome. Well, hey, I love a quick and concise approach. Some tips and tricks for growers. Thank you so much, Chris.
Yeah, the main thing is, everybody use your resources. There's
Yep.
tons of information out there. If nothing else, reach out to Bill or I. We can help you guys out personally.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm Bill Calkins with Tech on Demand on behalf of Chris and the entire Darwin Perennials team. Take care and sell a ton of perennials this year. It's an exciting category, big market. Go get them.
Have a great spring, everyone.